Good evening and welcome to this edition of the RC07 monthly webinar series, which this time is actually a discussion, ostensibly with a panel, but we're a panel of two and we see old friends in the audience. So we're hoping that everyone chimes in and contributes. The point of this panel is essentially to brainstorm ideas, and if someone is not sure, well, I do this, but I'm not sure it fits IPSA or it fits RC07, we're here to help you figure that out. And of course, at the end, convince you that you should submit to our track. There's a secret agenda to everything we do. After all, we are political scientists, right? This committee of the International Political Science Association, for the two people who are new to it, is actually a fairly old one. And it began in its earliest avatar, it was a Women in Development panel. Then it became a couple of different other things. And its newest name is Women in Politics in the Global South, which in the last year since I came in, we have redefined to mean gender rather than just women, and also redefined Global South not to be just geography, but also, I think experiences of marginality and exclusion in general, which allows us to say we study almost everything like everybody else. So if your question coming in was, well, does my research fit? The answer is probably ultimately yes. But we will take the long route to getting there. And what Amanda and I are going to do today is to set the stage briefly for this conversation, to which you are all invited to unmute and speak as and when you will, by talking about the kinds of issues we see people write about, the kinds of real life issues. And we both have this in common, that we are academics, but we're academics with 1.5 feet in the real world. So we are deeply engaged in the worlds where we work and we write and we teach. And so we want to talk about the real issues that are coming up and the things we want, the conversations we want our panels to be about at the upcoming IPSA Congress in Seoul in 2025. So on that note, and Amanda, I'm not going to do introductions. Introduce yourself and set the ball rolling. And of course, as usual, did I remember? No, I did remember to turn on the recording.
So I'm Amanda Gouws. I hold a research chair in gender politics at Stellenbosch University in South Africa. And I was a previous chair of RC07. I actually thought at that point it was still called Women in Development. And I thought that what we do as political scientists is so much broader than development. So I changed the name then to Women Politics in the Global South. And Swarna has now, redefined it. And I think the way that Swarna went about it is really a good way. So for me, I think that what I've seen over the years, and this is the issue about doing empirical research. So very often empirical research, but not really linked to theory. And I think this is the important thing about, as political scientists, that we should also try to build theory. So if you work in theory and, I think that if we look at sort of the fields in political science, and I think most people now work in a more interdisciplinary way, but, we have country case studies, but then there's also comparative politics. And the work that I've done for many years is political behavior, which is survey research. But my latest work is on violence against women, and specifically, of course, in the sub-Saharan African context. But I think if we look at the broader global agenda, what we need to also think about is how this specific moment in history, which I think, when we look at, for example, what's happening in Europe and in North America is the rise of populism and illiberal democracies. And then coming out of that, the whole notion of anti-gender ideology. And it does not manifest in the same way in the countries in the global south, but it does in different ways. And I think, a center or critical issue here is the issue of migration, right? So if I come back to the African context again, we see how people leave and in these leaky boats and cross the Mediterranean from North Africa to go to Europe, and how many of them die. So we need to also think about those issues, right? They're deeply political and they're deeply gendered. And I, for example, have linked the work of Achille Mbembe on necropolitics to what's happening in the Mediterranean, right? And how people die. It's about lives that are not valuable and whose lives not matter. So we have a much broader spectrum, I think, of topics that you can submit to an RC07 panel. And we have now, Swarna, how many closed panels do we have at the moment?
We have 4 open panels of our own and one that was proposed to us. In addition, we're looking at putting together one closed panel on migration. We're talking about doing a women, peace and security panel with the Armed Forces and Society, RC. And we're talking with, I'm sorry to say, I can't remember the number of the RC. We're talking to another RC about family law. Those presumably will all 3 be closed panels.
Yeah, so I think, and coming back to the issue of family law and rights, there's a lot of people who also work on the international treaties, right? And what it means in your specific context, in your region. So that also, 2 years ago, we did a special issue of a journal on Beijing, well, it's already nearly 5 years, Beijing plus 20, and now it's Beijing plus 25 coming up. So there are all kinds of issues also related to our thinking around those international treaties. Yeah. Yeah, so Swarna, that's what I think, just to sort of open the floor, and I'm handing over to you again.
In terms of research areas that I actually I found myself doing a lot of work around 1325 and women, peace, security. And that's actually a very rich and growing area, and Heidi can attest to that as well. But at IPSA, the gaps that I find are empirical studies. In fact, there are very few WPS papers. Oddly enough, they're everywhere else, but they're not really at IPSA. There are very few people doing foreign policy work whose papers, you rarely find a full foreign policy panel. Definitely not women, peace and security. You don't find in areas of women, peace and security studies like that deal with institutional reforms, or areas like private security, mercenaries that I know are emerging out there in the field. Those haven't quite entered the IPSA universe as yet. But more appalling to me, and maybe bringing us to the question of regional issues, is the fact that in Poznan, that was 2016, in Buenos Aires in 2024, in both of those years, Afghanistan was in the front burner of global politics. And there was barely a single paper, and certainly hardly any of those were written by Afghans. And I think that that's an appalling lacuna and likely to be replicated for other conflict areas. It's not that people from those areas are not studying in the global north, where they might have access to more resources to come and present, but I'm not sure why they fall through the gaps, but I just don't see those papers there. I don't see last year at Buenos Aires, there were a few panels on Mozambique, and they were put together by an NGO that a Portuguese research organization working in Mozambique, but that's the exception. There's very little, you talked about migration, there's very little about displacement, post-displacement, there's very little relating to disasters, and there is a climate change RC, but who is looking at the intersection of gender rights, climate justice? Presumably that would be us. So that's something, and I'm looking straight at Farah on my screen when I say this. This is something that I would love to see a closed panel on, because I think this is something that we need to be putting out there. I see the purpose of conferences like IPSA. I see two purposes. I think that it's a good place to meet people and to hear about topics that you might be working on or might be interested in. But it's also a good place to start conversations about things where we could have impact in our own way as academics. I don't think it's necessarily the best place. And I see at least one very young scholar. So I say, it's not necessarily the best place to get feedback on your paper. You're better off emailing it to people you know and asking them. Because the structure of IPSA panels is such that you'll have your 10 minutes and then you'll quickly move on and people will shuffle off to another panel. But we need to be using, particularly an RC like this, to push all of us to put our intellectual and our institutional resources to work on the issues that matter to us as well. And maybe that's a very activist statement, but you can then tell I'm not up to the literature, really. I don't really know what people are writing about. But women in politics, for example, we are talking about the year of elections everywhere. And in every election, women are underrepresented. Kamala Harris does not make up for the rest of the world, or even for the rest of the gaps in the US. So there are women in politics panels, but what are those? Are those panels still at the descriptive level? What would be wonderful about closed panels, I think, would be for people to push the conversation a little. An open panel is a little bit of a lottery. People will write at different levels of different points in their work in progress. So you'll get something very descriptive and basic and something that's really off the charts for that panel, for the discussion. So I think that if we could get people to talk about violence against women in politics, the rise of cyber violence and cyber attacks, if people were to be writing even about, I think, the relationship between campaign finance and women's electoral participation, I'm suddenly thinking, I've always thought campaign finance was boring, but I'm now thinking, oh, why didn't I think more about that? And a shortcut, because I don't want to work on it, would be to attend a panel at IPSA. So, I mean, this is my haphazard second answer. But could we talk a little bit about a little more about regional issues, Amanda? And then we can open the floor up.
Yeah, what I want to say is that an issue with a closed panel is that you can work with people you know, and that forms a network. I don't know how many of you are also involved with RC19, which is the Women and Policy, and it's basically Global North. But they have many closed panels and they work together. So it also then helps with the election of board members because they're already networked. So for us, it's very difficult to elect board members if we don't know each other. And I mean, this has been a struggle all along. So regionally, I think this comes back to your point, Swarna, about regional collaboration, is that, you know, we can do stuff on Africa, stuff on Latin America, Asia. But I mean, it is actually also a good opportunity then to network some people to make up a closed panel. And I've seen Can you just switch off your?
Yes, I'll do that from my end too.
Yeah. That what was I going to say about closed panels? So what we've seen is that then you can develop actually a collaborative research project. I mean, I am busy with one in the African context about violence against women who stand as candidates in election, and that's a 3-country study. But that's a very important topic at the moment because it's a developing body of literature, and there's very little known about the African context. So if you start thinking more beyond just a closed panel, are those collaborative networks and how you can actually develop research projects out of those networks that in the end, I think can make a very important contribution, much more so than just one individual.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's really the way to go. And I think particularly if you're at the beginning of your PhD program, look around you at people at a similar stage, a little bit ahead, and see if they would want to do this with you. These are the people you will work with for the next 20, 30 years. And that's a great way to start. But also to think about it, a book has about 6 to 8 chapters. If you have 2 closed panels with 8 papers, you're halfway there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, are there, Amanda, are there things that political scientists in Southern Africa are talking about that the rest of us are not?
No, I think pretty much a big focal point at the moment is violence, gender-based violence in terms of country case studies, but then also this sort of violence against women who stand as in elections. And I think, again, the evergreen is women's representation in politics. How have we actually moved forward or not moved forward? South Africa has just had an election. We went from 45% women to 35% women. Of course, the ANC lost its majority position. So, yeah, those issues remain evergreen. And then, of course, the whole issue of poverty and social inequality, which is a huge problem in the sub-Saharan Africa region. And, of course, in South Africa, but also looking at other countries in sub-Saharan Africa are issues around sex work. And are we going to decriminalize sex work? And I mean, we've just had at Stellenbosch University a few weeks ago a situation where a white man from Europe came to tell us about sex work as a crime against humanity. And you sit there and you think, I mean, I cannot believe what I hear. Why was this man even given a platform? So you can see if you're not vigilant about these issues, then again, it's that sort of, and Swarna and I talked about this often, is how in an organization like IPSA is so northern focused that very often they do not understand the issues around just how difficult it is for us to travel, right? How expensive it is for us to travel. And I think the stronger we are as an RC, the more voice we can have in making a case for, the unequal treatment of the global South. And like Swarna said, it's not a geographical region, but it's those regions who are far more under-resourced and have difficulty putting their issues on the agenda.
Yeah. I mean, this is really an opportunity. What I'm really hoping is that this is an opportunity for us to say what is important to us. I don't think that, and Pam is one of the people who started this RC, so she can confirm this cannot have been started for the convenience of global North feminists to be writing about our lives. Well, that's a very strong statement. Maybe I should have tempered it. never mind. But I think that we need to talk. I'm also thinking of the things that we talk about, maybe not writing in political science journals. We talk about caste and interreligious conflict, minority rights issues here across the region in South Asia. I think that, and Farah would maybe agree, maybe Ishleen would, Pam would, that we're talking, a lot of our conversations around violence, political violence, are also defined by funding patterns around countering violent extremism, agenda set by that. And some of us push it back, but nevertheless, there is a tension between regional discourses around political violence and global discourses and global funding around violence-related studies. So this is another area. I think that our panel should also be talking about some of these, I guess, meta issues, the issues around how we study the issues around how the issues become important. And I think this is an RC board that will make room for them if you write the proposals. Yeah. So should we invite people around the Zoom room to unmute and speak? And please do. This is a brainstorming disguised as a panel. Unmute and speak.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Farah. I am a recently retired diplomat. I think that's the best way to, but I've been working with Swarna for many, many years academically. And I've kind of gone back into academia now. I'm a senior research fellow at the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, recently appointed. Swarna, while I was listening to you, if I could just throw something from my own background, which is actually, something that we don't hear much discussed, is the feminist foreign policy. Now, in the global north, I think it's from Sweden, which this came out, and there are 15 countries, I believe, which have subscribed to this idea of feminist foreign policy, but we don't hear much about it from our part of the world.
Farah, we do. It's the ice cream flavor of the season here. People are throwing money hand over fist at it.
No. Bear with me. When we talk about feminist foreign policy, it's very much about bringing women into the foreign policy, giving equal rights to women, working in the diplomatic circle. But that's not, for me, what feminist foreign policy is. I want to go back to the book we wrote about on what does security mean for women. And because if you can cast your mind to that, it was very different to what normally in traditional sense security is. And so for me, when we talk about feminist foreign policy, it's not about including women ambassadors. It's not about becoming a woman to be the foreign secretary or the foreign minister, which is pretty much what is being said. I think we need to do some research and go back into what do we actually mean by that? What do we actually want out of that? Having a feminist foreign policy. I mean, it's not a tick box exercise. For me, it's not. It's not saying, okay, 50% of our, ambassadors are women. I mean, Maldives, a couple of years ago, very proudly announced that. And this is great, 50% of our ambassadors were women, so that was a great achievement for us. But is it that what we really want? Or do we want something more? I mean, how do we as women look at foreign policy issues? How do we make decisions on foreign policy matters? For me, this is the direction we need to go to, not the tick box exercise. I'm just going to leave it there because I can go on and on about that.
You just unmute and come in, Diane.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. My name is Diana. And actually, Farah just took some words out of my mouth because I wanted to touch on the topic of feminist foreign policy, which is a subject that I've been very interested for quite a little bit of time. And I agree with most of what you said, Farah. And I just wanted to add that it would be an interesting approach to look at feminist foreign policy from a decolonial standpoint, because I have found through my readings and my own studies that a large amount of literature about feminist foreign policy, it's actually written by white women in the global north, in the minority world, and oftentimes does not really reflect the realities of women in the global south. It disregards some of the realities of indigenous women, LGBTQ plus communities, etc. So, so if you go and look at some of the frameworks of the countries that have already adopted feminist foreign policies, say Sweden. I mean, it does no longer have a foreign policy, a feminist foreign policy, but I mean, if you look at that, it does not really take into account the realities of women or of certain groups of communities that we have, for instance, in Latin America, a region which I belong to. So I think it would be interesting to open up the discussion, aside of what Farah rightly said, but also to talk about how you know, I mean, gender is a world, but I don't think that oftentimes feminist foreign policy is an umbrella for all these groups that may not be represented. And yeah, of course, you know, it goes well beyond of appointing women ambassadors and diplomats. And, you know, I think the conversation has to go beyond of, you know, actually looking at a subject of knowledge, which has historically been dedicated to the elites, to highly educated women, and maybe broaden the conversation to go beyond that. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Anyone? Heidi?
Hi, hi everyone. I'm Heidi Hudson. I'm from the Free State University, and I'm actually new to IPSA. I'm more familiar with what we do at ISA. And yeah, I think that the debates are probably very similar, and also there's a lot of marginalization and very few panels on Africa. But I think it's up to the scholars in Africa. But of course, there are constraints. But I just wanted to come in on the issue of the feminist foreign policy. And I hate to be advertising, but at Bristol University Press, we have a new book series, and there's on feminist reimagining of international studies. And there's a book by In the Making, a co-edited collection by Tony Haastrup and colleagues. And they taking not that the aim is to take a global perspective, but there are many voices from the global south. And what they also want to do is to bring in the practitioner voice, so that we don't just have this top-down discussion. So watch out for that one. It will probably come your way, but I think it sounds as if it's along the lines of what we want to achieve with this kind of approach in IPSA.
I have to say that the more I think of, the longer that I'm sitting in this RC chair, the more I'm thinking about issues like, how will I get a hold of the book that you're talking about? Because Amanda just had to send me her book. I couldn't buy it anywhere. But this is also not a sustainable option for any of us as Global South scholars. So I would love it if we could just have a space at the Seoul Congress where we could also talk about these things, because it's not enough to have theoretical panels on equality. You know, what are we there for? So let's also think about it. Sainala, would you like? I'm so happy to see you here. Am I saying your name correctly? And would you like to say something?
Thank you very much. Yes, you're saying my name correctly. So my name is Sainala Galebe. I'm from the Catholic University of Malawi. This is the largest private university in Malawi. I'm in political science department, so I'm a lecturer in political science. I've worked in industry for about 10 years, then I decided to move into the academia, and I just love it there. So my area, when I wrote my thesis, my master's thesis, I wrote on violence against women during primary elections. So this is an area that is very close to my heart. I love reading around this topic. Coming to this point, I've always wanted to proceed with my studies, and one of the things I was looking at was to continue in this line of studying women in politics and the violence against women as well, or the institutions around politics and how they affect women. But then someone told me, no, women have been over-researched now. You should go into climate change or something. There's so much out there. And I think in my own reflection, I've thought, okay, women have been over-researched. There's so much literature, but the problem is still there. And maybe that's something that we should be concerned about. And looking at my country in Malawi here, most of the literature is just general on violence against women. So there will be figures on numbers on how many people were attacked, say in a campaign period, but no one is telling us, wait, women leaders, were they just party members who were getting attacked? Is it activists? Or are they ordinary women on the street? All this information is not there. And then to add on to that, in Malawi, we have this problem of poverty. So we do have an intersection between women's participation in politics and poverty. A lot of women are given money to go and attend political rallies, which sometimes they don't have the right way to get back home. And you wonder whether that kind of participation is real participation for those women. And then the other thing that I've noted is on the cyber violence against women, looking at a few ladies who've made it to the top in our political parties, the attacks seem to be getting worse the higher you go up. And I think this is something that maybe would also be worth studying in my case. That looking at the social media, the public page that we can see, you see once a new appointment comes in, then a huge barrage of attacks comes upon this woman. So I think generally speaking, there's so much to do in studying violence against women, cyber violence against women in my country, Malawi, which could be quite similar to a number of countries around us as well. Thank you very much.
I think if you put out something saying that you were interested in doing a panel, a cross-regional panel on this topic, you would quickly find takers, because I see from the RC07 Twitter feed that there are people in Latin America and in Asia all working on different dimensions of this. So, you know, this is my agenda, right? To push you all. I see other people. I see Analia. Am I saying your name correctly? You've just begun volunteering with us, and I'd love to meet you if you would turn on your camera and introduce yourself.
Hi, how are you? Hello, my name is Analia Or. I'm a political scientist and I live in Argentina, in the south of Argentina. This is the south of the south. And I work at the Universidad Nacional de la Patagonia, San Juan Bosco, in Comodoro Rivadavia City. And I'm interested in also in studying how women come to the positions, to electoral positions. How do they get being a candidate, and what kind of obstacles do they find? And well, I'm practicing my English also this year because I want to read more fluently in English. I read a lot, but I want to read more. And I want also to talk with people from other countries that share the same interests. And I understand what our colleague said just a few minutes ago, because women's issues are always questioned, are always tell that, for example, no, that's something that it's already studied, or that's not enough interesting, there's always something to say about that. Nobody says anything about, for example, studying fiscal rentier states. I don't know, other things, but about women's issues are always something to say. That's our life as women also. So I think that we have to study with knowledge about what is known about this issue and what other questions can we propose, and studying also and taking our research to another stage, for example, questioning reasons, doing more questions of why things happen.
I think her connection just froze.
But now we have to ask why. Thank you.
Gracias.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too. Other people I want to invite, and then everyone is actually welcome, but I do want to hear from Rangina and from my colleague at Krea, Geeti Das, and Pam Rajput, and everybody else. This is actually for you.
Sorry, can you hear me? Is my sound gone? It's the sound, you can't hear me.
Very faintly.
Okay, I will leave and come back.
Pamji?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Let me first thank the RC chair and other board members for convening this meeting. I got nostalgic, as a matter of fact, because, and when our previous speaker was speaking from Argentina, I'm reminded of that it was in Argentina IPSA meeting that I was asked to take over at that time it was a study group, right? SG. And I took over from Najma Chaudhary from Bangladesh and Barbara from America. And thereafter, I worked hard to get it the status of RC, right? So I'm very happy that the leadership is in right hands now and that we are going strong. Having said that, I'm quite enthused to hear different people. I would just like to add a few things to that. That when we are talking of feminist foreign policy, Swarna, I will share with you a book, beautiful book that has come out, that is really talking about what actually foreign policy when we are talking of feminine policy. I'll share the name of the author with you. But I think it's high time we also, talk of women in international diplomacy. Going beyond just feminist foreign policy, the kind of role women have played outside the foreign offices, be it these Security Council Resolution 1325 or getting in the Statute of Rome that the violence that happens to women that should also be treated as a crime against this thing. So I think we have to talk about broader also women's role in international diplomacy. And the other I feel is, I'm just throwing the ideas, the other I feel is that now we are soon this month going to have Summit of the Future, right? This Summit of the Future, of course, in section in part 1 and other places, it talks about gender equality, Beijing and all that. But what I'm concerned with, where it talks about the UN structure, right? We are talking about the changes in the UN structure. So could our empirical research turn into also advocacy? You see, we also need to focus on advocacy for that matter, that what kind of role women should play when these, structures are being talked about. Where are women over there, right? So that's another thing that I want to say that we should keep in mind. Again, we are talking about violence against women, I'm all for this. And I think this should be one of the panels in our next, IPSA meeting, violence under different. And now we have to include AI also, right? That we have to focus on that. Financing, you have said. Again, it's a matter of empirical study that when we are talking on women in politics, we do mention diversity, but we are not empirically studying, right? Is the diversity actually there and how it has helped women in positive direction for that matter? So that is an issue again for this thing. Last but not the least, I want to say is, that might be a little odd question for all of us. And that is, we keep saying when women are in politics, formal politics, right? Why do we need women in politics? And we say, well, they are transformative, they are, inclusive. I think it is high time, we studied women actually in politics. Are they really inclusive? Are they really bringing transformative politics? Who are bringing, in the South, that kind of a transformative politics, which could be model for others to follow? And if not that, so this can be empirically, studied. As in our last meeting, there were about, 60, 70 odd women, and I asked them, do you think women who have been elected in your area are being transformative, are being inclusive? And the answer was no, right? If it is not that, what is it that stops them from being transformative, from being inclusive from that matter? So let us not be idealist, right? Right? So let the theory be tested, and what kind of advocacy needs to be do? How do we remove those barriers? I think some of these questions are there that I want this RC to consider. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Pam. I would actually say that the theme for this Congress is, I'm probably misquoting, but essentially it's democratization and autocratization in polarized societies, which is a hard topic for political people to write on and go home safely. We do want you to go home safely, but we want to say to you that it's all right to let a critical perspective inform your question. Because I think many of us old-timers came to the study of politics for political reasons. We didn't come to it because we thought the methodology looked riveting. We want to ask these questions. And so I just want to say I would welcome proposals that ask hard questions, even if they're not immediately answerable. Rangina, you have it's lovely to see you, Rangina Jan.
You too, yes, after many, many years, and happy to see the whole forum here. I have to apologize and say that I know nothing about this wonderful group, but the topic, you sent the topic to this panel and it just was intriguing. So I'm coming in with absolutely no knowledge of what this wonderful group of people do. So I'm keen to learn and hopefully participate more in the future.
We'll catch you up.
Thank you.
I'm going to call Geeti because she has to run.
Okay.
Geeti, I really want to hear from you.
Okay, hi, thank you. And my apologies for the background noise. I'm actually at the university right now. So I work on infrastructure and global politics and urban politics. And through that, I came to looking at militarization. And one of the questions I was thinking about, especially with the framing that you gave just now, Swarna, was maybe reframing some of this as women's relationship or gendered relationships to the systemic and legitimate means of violence. And I think, as I was just listening to the conversation, and I am sorry, I'm just coming in, I'm probably missing a lot. But one of the things I was thinking about was, years ago when I was at graduate school, Samantha Power came to speak, and this was billed as this wonderful feminist event because she was Samantha Power. And then everybody who stood up in the audience and turned our backs, we were all sort of framed as anti-feminist. And I think back to that moment where there was this kind of policing around what constitutes a legitimate feminist standpoint. around a woman in a diplomatic, powerful position. And the other thing I was thinking about was women in the FARC and the way that they, post-democratization, they had to recede into domestic space. And so their lives materially changed in ways that we might consider less feminist. So I think just sort of, for me, I don't know if this is the right framing, but just thinking about it as the gender relationship to the legitimate means of organized violence, or sorry, organized means of legitimate violence might be one way to frame it. And I'll stop there. Also, hi, my name is Giti, and I'm assistant professor of politics at Krea University, where I am also lucky enough to be Swarna's colleague.
Lucky enough to have you as a colleague, but this is really a session for brainstorming, for throwing out ideas. We all have till November 5th, although I urge you to please not wait till the last minute. We have till then. We can email each other, we can WhatsApp each other, whatever, and discuss and develop these ideas. We can find our co-panelists from this group and the RC list. So, this is only a beginning. Your ideas don't have to be fully fleshed out. Far from it as yet. So
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So Giti, thank you for that, because I really think we need to interrogate the notion of feminism, right? And what it means, and specifically in this moment in history where there's so much anti-gender ideology, right? And claiming that certain types of feminism isn't feminism. So I would encourage you to write about that. And Sainala, thank you for your input. Can you please put your email address in the chat? We're having a conference in South Africa in November on exactly what you're working on, and I would like to invite you. So just doing some networking here.
Wonderful. Let's do more of it. Would other people like to come in and speak? Snigdha, Michelle, Ishleen. I'm calling out people I've met, some of whom I know very well. But others are also welcome to speak. Kaushiki. For those of us who are in Asia, South Korea is not far away. For those who are in Africa, it's a little further away. But many of us managed to get to Argentina. So I urge us to try and make it to South Korea as well to attend this. There is travel funding from IPSA. It's competitive, but it's something that you can apply for at least. I also want to say a couple of things that Amanda and I have been talking about are mentoring webinars where we can talk to you if there's interest about putting in your proposals or how to actually plan your presentation, because you'll have a very limited amount of time at the Congress, and we'd like to use it, like you to use it optimally. So we're thinking of things like that. We're also thinking about, we have a monthly webinar. Please present your research maybe as an interim for the Congress, or maybe a different project from what you want to bring to the Congress. But these are all options that are available. We're also brainstorming conversations about some of the structural challenges faced by Global South researchers, some of the ways we can get around the challenges of getting to the Congress. So these are all things that we're brainstorming. One of the things we really need are more hands on deck. So if, like Sainala and Analia, you're able to volunteer, please do volunteer. We really need your help. And the floor is still open and we have 10 minutes left. So anybody else? I will now call out names of people who might be shy. Yeah, but Nupur? Nupur, Snigdha, Rangina.
Hi, I am Nupur Ray, and actually very new to the group. I kind of, had registered for this, and I thought the topic was very interesting. I am a faculty at University of Delhi, Department of Political Science, Kamala Nehru College. And my PhD and other work is from JNU, and I do look at gender-based violence. I'm looking at violence against women, especially in the context of sex work. Also, looking at body as a site of violence and a site of resistance. There's also, an article paper that I wrote about in terms of looking at politics of presence, and therefore, in that context, the role of women in politics in India. So yeah, I thought I'll just look like some issues and some areas where aligning it with what I'm doing and writing and learning. So I thought I'll just join and perhaps be able to. I did go for the ISA conference, and it was nice. But yes, when I'm looking at IPSA and when I'm looking at the committees and the work, I do feel that perhaps there's little more here for me to share and present. So hello everyone, and hello Professor Rajagopalan. Pleasure meeting you.
My name is Swarna. So, and look forward to seeing your proposal and to meeting you, either in Delhi or in Seoul.
Yeah.
Rangina and somebody else, I'm sorry, Kaushiki. Snigdha.
Thank you. So I just wanted to pick up on what Amanda and Geeti, who left us, spoke about. I'm personally from Afghanistan, for those of you who don't know me, and I did serve as the last Minister of Education right before the takeover, or the handover rather, to the Taliban by the international community. And I'm interested in this notion of defining what feminism or who is a feminist. Particularly since the fall of Afghanistan 3 years ago, back to an autocratic and a terrorist regime called the Taliban. When I went back to America, because I dared to stand up and question the politics of how the country was handed over back to the Taliban, and instead of fighting, continuing this war of killing and violence and destruction that would, of course, impact women continuously, I'm daring to propose, how do you work with an autocratic, terrorist, extremist group as women to insert the change that we desire in the society? And what I found in the American context, at least, is that there's no space for that. You cannot call yourself a feminist and be willing to talk to a group called the Taliban. And so for me, someone who's always embodied this identity of feminism and being a feminist, just not in the form of the extreme ultra liberal, notion of what feminism is in the white American context, I find it very disheartening that in my 48 years of age, with the experience of more than 20 years of life experience that is so incredibly different than so many other people still find it to still say that I'm not a feminist. So I look forward to learning and getting to know who's working in this field of what's a feminist, what's not a feminist, and this whole context of global South. No matter how much the world still thinks that empowering women is a good thing, and of course it is, but I've also found that when we empower women who are brown or women of color, then if we don't fit that same radar as women of the global north, then somehow we're not good enough. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I've left the link to the Google form for the mailing list. Please join in, that way you can see. Yeah,
Can I say something? I think maybe we should have a panel on this, on the meaning of feminism for those of us who work from the perspective of the global South. I don't know, Swarna, what do you think about that?
I think they're all great ideas. I'm just excited to reach Seoul and listen to all of this. I just wanted to interrupt and say, because there are people talking about their own interests, and there's a Google form which asks you for that, and it's a database where you can find each other. So please fill it out so we can all find you. But Ishleen, why don't you introduce yourself in person as well? I think these are great ideas. Amanda, we should do this. We should do one on institutions, on violence. But let's do closed panels. Let's find each other here and form those panels, not open ones.
Do we still have time for closed panels?
Closed panels, we have till November 8th, November 5th. So
That's great.
Hello,
Ishreen?
hi. I'll be very quick. Sorry, it's like 5 a.m. here, so
So
I did
thank
not
you
switch
very
on my
much for
video.
coming.
Yeah. So I'm a graduate student. I'm just about to submit my dissertation, my thesis, my master's thesis, and I had the chance to present at IPSA last year in Argentina, and I have been in contact with the panel through the newsletters. So I was listening a lot about a very important work on gender-based violence around the world and feminist foreign policy. And I started to feel if, there was a space for what I do, which is not primarily on, very closely, I don't closely work on violence, but I rather seek to understand how women leadership, especially at the grassroots, has the potential to impact larger climate dialogues, and how currently in the global south, I look at the northern Himalayas, I look at policies in Ladakh and Kashmir primarily, to understand how in these very ecologically sensitive zones, there are very small women groups who are leading the way for adaptation and mitigation processes, and how a developmental politics from a larger feminist perspective, because the theoretical framework I use is feminist political ecology, to understand the larger practical implications on the ground. And I started to wonder if that is something the panel would be interested in. Hence, I put forth the message.
No, it
But
was
thank you.
absolutely. And I think that if, for example, you connect with us on Twitter or through the mailing list, I'll try and find a way for people to connect with each other. I'll figure that out over email. I think you'll be able to put a panel together very easily. I can tell you that Farah's worked around climate change for a long time. So right here, you've got your discussant or chair. But if you can find other people whose empirical research is now on this, it is not difficult to put a closed panel together if you're actually actively working in a research area. You need 4, max 5. A 5-person panel will not have any time to talk. 4 people optimally. Find 3, yourself, 3 others. Anybody in this room can serve as a chair. A chair essentially does, okay, this is a horrible thing to say, but a chair is essentially there because they have to be there and move the panel along. The discussant has a more important job. So you find someone who's also interested in the issues, same issues, maybe doesn't want to write a paper. Your panel is made. It's very easy. And we're all here to mentor you. We've been there, done that. Just drop us a line and say, I want to do this. Help me.
Thank you. Thank you so
much. I want this.
encouraging.
Look, I'm here for another 3 years. I agreed to chair this and I'm here for 3 years. And I'm at a point where what I can get out of this is getting the next generation in, helping all of you get a start, learning the things that I had to learn the long, hard way, So please reach out.
Thank you. That's really very encouraging, as I'm looking forward to doing my PhD application soon. So I think panels like these really help me understand the larger academic arena.
Right here, you have a little pool of people who will work with you, some of whom may share your interests. So don't,
Thank you so much.
Just go ahead and do this. Anybody else? Michelle. I've known Michelle since she was an undergraduate, true confession. She's a long-standing, she's a poet and a long-standing volunteer with my NGO.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm actually, it's 11 p.m. here. I'm in Australia and I'm in bed, but I found it really interesting and it's been so long since I saw ma'am's face. So I just wanted to come by, and I'm doing my second master's after a decade. I'm doing international relations and peace and conflict studies, 2 degrees, and I'm I have one more semester to go in University of Queensland, and I'm just looking into getting into research more, and I'm just really open, and especially I'm interested in Indigenous politics now, and I'm looking at feminist angles there, and just recently, something called multinationalism, in the sense of how sovereignty can be redefined through Indigenous lens. And that's what I'm looking at right now. But it's been so interesting, and I really want to try and submit a paper, get back to research. So looking forward to interacting with all of you. Thank you.
Good, great. Would anyone else like to say something before we wrap up? Amanda, would you like to? Snigdha, you were waiting. Acha,
Yeah.
jaldi bolo. Bolo.
Good evening, ma'am. It's a pleasure. I got to connect with your RC. And I just when I met you in Argentina, I felt like I got a mentor. I recently completed
Please. Let's just talk about the work.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Ma'am, when we discuss about women-led development, you said that this term is only wrong. So I just want why women need development, why we are focusing towards that we need upliftment. And there's when I read somewhere regarding global south politics, that there's cultural barrier also and patriarchal barrier also. I just completed my dissertation in tribal women health, which I got to discuss with you. So ma'am, can we connect this point also, this cultural and patriarchal barrier, in the panel?
Yes, Michelle just talked about getting interested in tribal women's. There you are. That's what these conversations are about. That's two people connected, or more than two people connected today. So yes, we can talk about all of this. But what you need to do now is to focus your energy into a paper proposal, and remember that the filter for us is gender marginality, and add us as your track. And Amanda, now over to you.
I just want to thank everyone who came and who participated. I think, I feel very optimistic now that I've seen we actually have a good membership and that you are really interested in the work of RC07. I think we can do a lot together. And so, if you have some questions, email me or Swarna. I'll put my email address in the chat. But try to put together some panels, especially for those of you who have the similar interest. And then when we're all in Sahul, we can really get together and, talk about how to move forward with this RC, but also just to do social things together would be really nice.
Yes, I agree. This was really enjoyable above all. And thank you so much for coming. Those of you who had to set alarm clocks this morning to join us, I am especially grateful to you. And everybody else, we'll see you here again, and we'll see you in Seoul, inshallah.
Yes, please attend our webinars. It's once a month. Yeah.
Yes, please do attend.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye, ma'am.
Bye-bye, everyone.